Hi, Carly.
Hi, Greg.
How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I just wanted to really thank you so much for taking this time to do this interview with me. One of my goals, as you may know, we've spoken before, with Be Who You Want to Be, is to find some of the top visionaries from around the world to share their inspired mission with our community. So when I read about what you do to assist your clients, as well as your insightful and really easy to follow 8-week program in your book, Balance the Motherload, I just had to share your story.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So with that being said, I have a few questions that I'd love to ask you.
Okay.
So my first question, to kind of get the ball rolling,
Yeah.
is can you share a little bit about your background and how you came to develop the vision that you're working on and building?
Sure. So I think it would be safe to say that I consider myself to be a self-help junkie, and I have been for most of my life. I was reading self-empowerment books and personal development books all the way into high school, way back then. And so I've always been into personal development and empowerment and growth and learning and evolving. And in that time from when I graduated high school to, I would say up until, way into my 20s, I always tried to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And that was my quest. And I had a hard time. I was in advertising. I was a writer in the corporate world. After a couple of years there, I really discovered that for me, it was like my kryptonite. I couldn't find my footing there. And so then I did a lot of creative jobs, and it wasn't until my husband and I started discussing about, starting a family that I actually thought, oh, maybe I want kids. And, I was one of those women that it took a while for me to get pregnant. And so in that time and in that emotional up and down stage, my career and my ambition sort of was on the back burner. And I was more into the idea now of getting pregnant and having a kid and starting a family. Mm-hmm. And so, after a year and a half of trying, we found out what my issue was. I had endometriosis, so I had a surgery. Then I got pregnant. And so in that time, because it took me a while, because it was very emotional and physical and all of that stuff, when I finally had my son, I appreciated him and was so grateful for him in a way that, may or may not have been in the same way. I know I would have loved him, but I really appreciated him and was so grateful for him. And so in the first, I would say, 6 months of his life, I was so dedicated to being his mom. Mm-hmm. And it was a real shift for me because here I was somebody who was always so ambitious and driven and goal-oriented. And now it was all about him and changing diapers and going to baby classes and all of that stuff. And I found that at about the 6-month mark, I had a really low rock bottom moment in the Gap of all places. And, I was 20 pounds overweight still couldn't really blame it on the baby anymore. He was 6 months old. And, I just felt lost. I didn't know who I was anymore. And I was somebody who always loved personal development and empowerment. And I wasn't living that life. And it was a very good moment for me to have. It was, again, I say my defining moment. But I looked at myself and I was like, who are you? I love my son and I'm so happy I did this, but who am I? Mm-hmm. And in that process, it was really eye-opening because I sort of looked up at the universe at that point and I was like, just show me a sign. Tell me what I'm supposed to do with my life because, I love my son, but I never felt that I was wired to be that 24/7 stay-at-home mom. And God bless the women who can do it. It wasn't me. Right. So the next day I was watching a local breakfast television show and there was a man by the name of Bob Proctor who, if you're in the self-help world, you've heard of him. And he's a life coach, a motivational speaker, really, really well-known and respected in the industry. And at that time, it was 2006, and it was when The Secret came out, and the law of attraction, and your thoughts dictate your results, and all of that stuff. And of course, being the avid learner, self-help that I am and was, I'd heard of all this before. It was more just a reminder and sort of dusting off the knowledge and bringing myself back to who I really am. Mm-hmm. And so, to make this a long story shorter, I decided to become a life coach, and at that time I really wanted to make moms my focus, because I knew that I wasn't the only mother feeling this way. I wasn't the only mom putting herself last, taking care of everybody else, and I saw firsthand what that did to me as a person, as a mother, as a wife. It just, there's that myth that I bought into, and after talking to hundreds of other moms, that a good mom puts herself last in order to take care of everybody else. Mm-hmm. And so I have made it my mission then and since then to really empower women and, people in general to understand the importance of having to put themselves first in order to properly show up and be who they truly are meant to be, and that's how your children thrive. Mm-hmm. Is when you show up 100%, and when you put yourself last and sacrifice your happiness and your well-being because you think that that's going to make you a better person, parent, wife, husband, whoever. It's a backwards perception, in my opinion. And once I made that shift in my thinking, everything changed for the better.
Wow, that's a pretty amazing story from where you came from to where you are right now, and especially how you were able to have your son and the challenges that you faced. It's quite an amazing journey you've been on,
and I continue to be on it, but I'm just coming at it from a happier place.
Fantastic. So that leads me to my next question, which is a little bit further down the line of questions, but I'd like to ask it now, in fact.
Yeah, sure.
Purely because you just mentioned something about it. A lot of your initial work, as you kind of mentioned, started with focusing on assisting moms, similar to where you were in your life as a mother. Now, how does the work that you do help busy moms have both a career and raise kids?
Well, that's the $1 million question, right? And, for me, it was really understanding that I need to be happy first and fulfilled first. And so many working moms, I work from home and I work for myself, so I have that flexibility. And I know it's more difficult for women in the corporate world or professionals who may not have that same kind of flexibility. So for them, there's a lot of guilt. Mm-hmm. Right? There's guilt that they can't be at every soccer practice, or they're not there every morning or every dinner or whatever the case may be. Right. And, it's really, one of the main things that I help my clients with is managing the guilt around it and managing the expectation around what they are able to give and what they're not. Because there's one of the chapters in my book is actually expectation overhaul. Because really, we have to look at our life and say, okay, what's realistic? And then we have to align our values with that. And we have to really just say, okay, if I love my job and it makes me feel better and fulfilled and like I'm contributing in some way in the bigger picture, or I'm just happier because I'm working, then embrace that and be okay with that. Because at the end of the day, you're going to come home to your family in a much more fulfilled, happy, authentic way than if you stayed at home because you thought that's what you should do. But if you're anything like me, who again doesn't feel like I'm wired to stay at home, then I would be resentful and I would be frustrated. And yes, I'm clocking in more time with my child, right. But what's that quality of time like, right? When I'm looking at the watch, or I'm playing on my phone, or I'm distracted, or so it's really about the quality of time, checking in with yourself and saying, where am I happiest, where will I be the most fulfilled and authentic, because really we are role models for our children, and we can tell them to live happy lives and to go after your dreams. But if we are suppressing ours, what kind of message does that send? So again, very much in line with what you do, it's really empowering people to live their truth. What do you want to do? What fulfills you? Mm-hmm. And then everything else, in my belief, will fall into the place that it's meant to fall into, right? Your kids will be happier when you're happier.
Right.
Your kids will learn to live their dreams because you're living yours, right? So
fantastic. I mean, that's, as you said, that's part of the philosophy of my business and what I do with clients. And when I speak to parents with kids, it's one of the things that I say is that, if you really want to, kind of separate to what you're saying, but in some ways aligned with what you're saying, is I usually tell parents who have challenges with their kids, the likelihood of your kids being more fulfilled is to the degree that you're fulfilled. Mm-hmm. So if you're going out and doing what you love with your life and you're inspired by your own purpose, naturally that's going to overflow onto your children and they're going to follow suit, right? Because it's if you lead by example, then your kids will follow that example. So it's always wise to approach your own life as a parent with that balanced mindset, because your kids will tend to replicate that, which I try to advocate through the business. So that's great that you're doing that and that you continuing to do so with your other clients. You mentioned in your answer that about a book that you've written, which is fantastic, based on this 8-week program. You're welcome. Based on an 8-week program that you called Reinvent. There's your book.
I just happen to have it.
Of course.
What do you know?
It's called Balance the Mother Load, as you can see.
Yes. Yes. It's the Mother Load, Reinvent Your Life in just 8 weeks.
That's right. So that's the program you created. So what I'd like to know is, can you tell us a little bit more about what your program is about? Yes.
So basically, Reinvent is an acronym, and it's got the meaning of reinvention, right? And I think where a lot of women have challenges is when they make the transition from, woman to mother. Mm-hmm. It can be a tough transition, because here, before they were mothers, even if they were married, they still had a freedom, they had an independence. Their time was their own. If they were working or climbing up the ladder, then they were able to do that in a much less guilty way. And then when you sort of make the crossover to become a mother, it can be a tough transition, because, all the women that I've spoken to, they're smart, they're ambitious, they're driven, they're go-getters, and, they think that before they have a child that, it's just going to be, I'll just jump right back into who I was and I'll be able to handle it because I'm smart and ambitious and driven and independent and all that. And what often happens is this 7-pound little thing completely rocks their world. And they're just like, why can't I handle this? I just ran this corporation, or I just was, got $1 million for my client. Why can I not handle this 7-pound thing that's not even talking? Right. And they're just rocked. So, with the reinvention, the idea behind it is to really help women say, okay, it's not about completely changing who you are and forgetting that ambitious, driven person that you once were. Mm-hmm. But you also can't be entirely who you were, because you don't have the same kind of time, spontaneity, energy, all of that, if you want to be a present parent, right?
Sure.
So it's finding that balance and taking what you liked about your former self and just really reinventing who you are now. Mm-hmm. And so I made it into an acronym because there were so many, when someone says, what's the one thing you do for your clients? It's very hard for me to answer because there's so many challenges that moms face. And so I sort of drilled it down to the 8 hot topics that came up all the time in my coaching sessions or workshops. and I made it into an acronym. So can I just take you through quickly what the acronym stands for?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so the R, I have it here just so I remember. So the R is redefine motherhood, and that's where it's really important to get into what your core values are, what matters most to you and your family. And, there's so many women making decisions and choices because they think they should do it, or that's what society deems, the right way, or that's how your mother did it. And there's so many times women get lost because that's how they think they should do it, but it's really not in line with who they are and what their values are. So that's the first step.
Okay.
And then the E is envision your ideal life. So this is about, again, getting really clear about what's important to you. Dream again. Like, what do you want to do? What are your goals? What do you want to envision or accomplish? Because so many women put their life on hold or their dreams on hold in order to, drive their kids to their dreams. And they're like, oh, when my child moves out or is 18, that's when I'll think about my life again.
Right.
That's often, it's not too late, but, so much time has gone by. And I think that we can really start living our lives again right away.
Right.
Maybe after the first couple of months after your sleep deprivation has gone away. But after that, I think it's time. We can get back in there. And then the I is improve relationships. And, this can be with a spouse. It can be with any other important relationship in your life. But what often came up was with a spouse or a life partner. And that's because, what tends to happen is, when the baby is born, the order of importance tends to be baby first, maybe spouse or life partner, and then mother last. And I always say, again, in my humble opinion, that the order, now this is a fine line because so many were like, oh, how can I possibly do this? But after the baby is taken care of and safety and fed and all of that stuff is in consideration. So basic necessities of life taken care of. Then I believe the order is mom first, relationship second with partner, and baby last. Now, why? Because again, we have to be able to give and to give 100% of ourselves in order to be healthy, strong, fulfilled mothers. And the relationship is so important because you are a blueprint of what a healthy relationship looks like for your children, right? So if you're always fighting, or there's tension, or there's lack of affection, your kids pick up on that, and that's what they think is acceptable in a relationship. So it's really important to think about the relationship, to honor the relationship, to nurture the relationship. So that's why I say it in that order.
Okay.
And then the N is nurture yourself. So this again comes back to the importance of self-care and, why we need to pay attention to that. The V is vanquish mommy guilt, which, I talked about that a little bit before. There's so much. It's like, I think as women, we're born with guilt, the guilt gene, and then it multiplies when we become mothers. It's like they're gremlins, and we feed it after midnight and give it water, and then the guilt gene just multiplies. So it's really managing that and seeing whether our guilt is justified or not. And I would say about 9.5 times out of 10, our guilt is just something we put on ourselves.
Okay.
The E is expectation overhaul. So again, I talked about managing our expectations and aligning our expectations with what our reality really is. Mm-hmm. The N is nix negativity now, and this is mindset stuff. This is managing excuses and limiting beliefs and thinking that we can't, and all that stuff, that negative voice chatter that's in our brains telling us we're not good enough, or we can't because we're too old, or we're too young, or we've got kids, or whatever it is. It's really managing and silencing those voices and replacing it with more self-empowering talk and action. Mm-hmm. And then the last step is time management tune-up, because so many women are multitasking and they praise themselves for that. And yet, again, in my belief, I believe that multitasking is the quickest way to do a lot of things poorly. So, it's about focus and what we can delegate and what we can give up and, all that kind of stuff. So that's the Reinvent system that take a lot of my clients through, and yeah, that's what it is.
Fantastic. It sounds amazing. It is amazing. I've read your book, so I know it's amazing.
Thank you.
And at the end of this video, we're gonna give people an opportunity to go and go to your website or go to a location where they can actually purchase that if they want to, or if they choose to. But before that, I have a few more questions.
Sure.